For decades, when we think of the great mysteries of the ancient world, our minds immediately turn to the pyramids of Egypt. But there is a land forgotten, a kingdom obscured by history. That land is Sudan. For hundreds of years, people focused on the really big, well-preserved monuments of Egypt, overlooking what is today Sudan. But consider this: Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. At Nuri, a stunning cluster of pyramids lies along the Nile. This is the royal cemetery of the kingdom of Kush, the resting place of dozens of kings, queens, and princes. It was the absolute pinnacle of their culture. But one of the greatest mysteries lies right beneath our feet. How do you excavate a tomb in the middle of the desert that is completely underwater? This question led an expedition led by archaeologist Pearce Paul Creasman, alongside underwater archaeologist Kristin Romey, on a mission no one had ever attempted. They weren't just diving to explore, they were diving to excavate. They had found the 2,000-year-old flooded burial site of a Nubian king named Nastasen. To enter this tomb, one had to accept an unimaginable risk. Diving deep into a confined environment where the walls could collapse at any moment. The moment they touched the cold water, one thought emerged. This is someone's burial place. This is a place to be respected, a place to be learned from. And from the depths beneath the sand and water, the story of King Nastasen begins. The first task after accessing the flooded tomb was an arduous endeavor, demanding seamless coordination between two worlds: the cold, dark realm underwater and the scorching heat of the desert. The divers, under Pearce Paul's direction, had to contend with a monumental volume of mud and sediment that had settled and compacted over 2 millennia. Each heavy bucket of material retrieved from the burial chamber was not merely earth. It was a mixture of sand, debris, and fragments of history. On the surface, their colleagues, including Kristin, were ready to perform a meticulous, almost ritualistic task, sifting every bit of mud. Absolute caution was paramount here. The mud could not be allowed to dry, even for a brief moment. In the damp, underwater environment, organic artifacts and fragile metals like leather, wood, or gold leaf had been preserved. But once exposed to the dry desert air, they could instantly turn to fine dust, taking with them invaluable historical evidence. They worked under the intense sun, constantly wetting the sediment, turning over every grain of sand as if working in an open-air laboratory. They were searching for the precious signs of a civilization that had been sleeping. Tiny bone fragments, temporarily altered mineral grains, and above all, the undeniable glint of gold. And then, the miracle happened. After just a few minutes of intense sifting, an emotional shout of triumph echoed across the excavation site. They had found it. It was gold. The sense of victory spread rapidly. What was remarkable was that this wasn't glittering coins or large ingots, as one might imagine. Instead, it was gold leaf. Delicate, fine pieces of gold, almost transparent as silk paper. This suggested Nastasen's wealth and opulence had been used to wrap statues or adorn the tomb's interior. These gold fragments, compressed by time and water, were undeniable physical proof. They were in the right place, and crucially, this place was teeming with valuable artifacts. This early discovery was a good omen, confirming their perilous efforts were paying off. The excitement reached its peak when a more intact and symbolic artifact emerged from the sludge. A small statue known as a Shabti. In ancient belief, both the Kushites and Egyptians held that a king needed service even in death. These Shabti statues were carved in the likeness of the deceased king, serving as diligent servants, divinely summoned to shoulder all the hard work in the afterlife. The finding of the Shabti humanized the tomb, helping the team visualize Nastasen, a great king awaiting the aid of his stone retainers. It confirmed, beyond a doubt, that they were in the burial chamber of King Nastasen. However, this moment of triumph and confirmation immediately led to a haunting question that sent chills down their spines. How had this royal tomb remained completely untouched after 2,000 years? Pyramids, monuments, and royal tombs were the biggest, most vulnerable targets for looting in ancient history, even from the time of the pharaohs themselves. Discovering an intact tomb is extraordinarily rare. Had this wealth simply been hastily overlooked by robbers? Or was there some mysterious force, an invisible curse, that had stood guard, protecting this tomb from the insatiable greed of man throughout the centuries? This was not just a great discovery. It was an unsolved historical mystery that needed to be illuminated right beneath the desert ground of Sudan. To truly grasp the full significance of finding the intact gold and Shabti statues, we need to take a step back. We must consider who Nastasen was and who his great Nubian people were. History, as we often know and accept it, is typically told from a very narrow perspective, that of the victor. For centuries, the narrative of the great kingdom of Kush was almost always recounted through the narrow lens of the Egyptians. They were the people who had a developed writing culture, creating vast records of their conquests and relations with their neighbors. And within those records, historical bias often existed. They framed all people outside the borders of Egypt as lesser, weaker, or simply less important compared to their own grandeur. This is where archaeological science steps in and raises its voice. Archaeology does not tell the story of the elite who wrote history. It tells the story of those left behind, the story of the 99% of the population. It has the power to disprove or confirm historical accounts fraught with prejudice, bringing justice to underestimated civilizations. And the truth is, the kingdom of Kush was neither weak nor inferior. They were a powerful, formidable force, with a civilization as advanced as Egypt's. Strategically located along the Nile, they controlled trade routes that brought endless wealth from deep within Africa. Ivory, leopard skins, and most importantly, gold. Kush was so rich that their gold financed the lavish burial rites of the Egyptian pharaohs. Their glory reached its pinnacle when, during an astonishing period of history, Kushite kings conquered and ruled all of Egypt as the 25th dynasty. They controlled a territory larger than any later pharaoh. Nastasen was a direct descendant of these warrior kings, and he was buried at Nuri, the center of this illustrious dynasty, beneath the shadow of a magnificent pyramid. Returning to the tomb, archaeologists have long known that pyramid tombs, with their concentrated wealth, were the biggest and most vulnerable targets for looting in history. Back in the 19th century, an American archaeologist came here. He found the tomb partially flooded and grudgingly sent a worker to hastily retrieve a few Shabti statues just to confirm the tomb's identity, then left. That half-hearted act of looting was all that occurred. But as Pearce Paul's expedition team approached the final burial chamber, the third room, they began to sense the impossible, its pristine nature. Pearce Paul guided Kristin deep into the dark chamber. As their powerful dive lights swept across the sandstone walls, the light stopped on a small niche on the wall. And there, the light caught something unmistakably glittering. small flakes of gold. This was incontestable proof. If any robber had entered the tomb, they surely would have taken these glittering gold items right at eye level, within easy reach. The small gold flakes lay there, tranquil for thousands of years, as if waiting. This could only mean one thing. The tomb was completely, absolutely untouched. Who or what performed the task of protecting King Nastasen more effectively than any army or curse? The answer lay in the very hostile conditions they were working in: water. It was the rising of the Nile's waters, partially due to climate change and partially due to constructed dams, that had flooded the entire area. Water had become a perfect natural shield, turning the tomb into an inaccessible treasure trove for any looter for 2 millennia. Nastasen had an intact tomb, a precious historical treasure rarely seen since the time of King Tutankhamun. But this 2,000-year-old shield was now collapsing. The very thing that had protected him, the water, was now the greatest threat to those who sought to discover him. Could the archaeological team survive the water's fury and the risk of collapse, or would they be trapped forever in the dark alongside this ancient king? The excitement of finding intact gold from the previous season was quickly overshadowed by a cold reality. When the expedition team returned to the Nuri area a year later, they were confronted with a hydrological shock. The water level had risen by at least 15 feet, about 5 meters, compared to the last season. The tomb was no longer just partially flooded. It was entirely submerged deep beneath the immense, endless pressure of the Nile River. The Nile, Nastasen's protector, had now become their most fearsome foe. Attempting to pump the water out of the tomb, although the ideal solution, was technically impossible and an act of archaeological suicide. The hydrostatic pressure from the Nile's aquifer was too great. It continuously flowed through the porous sandstone walls, seeping inward like 100 faucets that never stopped. Archaeologist Pearce Paul described this dilemma with a simple but terrifying metaphor. Trying to dry out the tomb is like trying to suck water out of a paper bag placed deep in the ocean. If you draw the water out, the external pressure immediately removes the internal support. What happens? That colossal pressure will crush the bag. Draining the water would cause the 2,000-year-old structure of the tomb, already fragile, to collapse instantly. Faced with this threat, the expedition team had no choice but to make a difficult decision. Work fully submerged, they had to accept the water as their working environment, embracing all the accompanying personal safety risks. And in this harsh environment, the greatest danger was not the stone or lack of oxygen, but panic. The slightest moment of panic would be enough to turn a mission of historical discovery into an irrecoverable tragedy. Kristin, the underwater archaeologist, took on the role of primary safety monitor. She had to create a meticulous mental map of every dark chamber, every hidden corner. The team had to undergo a terrifying transition, abandoning the bright, dry sunlight of the desert, passing through the dark ceremonial staircase, and plunging into a completely different world. Colder, wetter, and darker than ever before. It was a place where all familiar senses were stripped away. As the divers, led by Pearce Paul, pulled themselves through the narrow steel chute fixed into the burial chamber, the true moment of horror began. The instant their heads submerged and they began to disturb the sediment accumulated over centuries, mud and sand stirred up violently, causing zero visibility. Pearce Paul: as soon as you start working, the visibility is zero. It's like you are blindfolded and working in a room. Sometimes you're even upside down. You have to build a mental map in your head, relying entirely on touch to feel the walls, the artifacts, and your own position. They were groping in a confined space. Every sense had to be strained to 110%. Any struggle or panic could cause them to become trapped, or worse, shift a section of the already weak stone. Kristin and the surface support team were the only remaining link to the outside world. She had to track every minute of the dive time. They had a minimalist communication protocol using only hand squeezes. One squeeze meant okay, and a rapid sequence of squeezes meant emergency. They knew the tomb had partially collapsed in the past, and that knowledge haunted them. There was no guarantee the remaining sections were sturdy. If a diver lost contact or exceeded their time limit, Kristin would have to dive down immediately, fumbling in the dark to search for them. They were risking everything. Behind the dark veil, the terrifying water pressure, and the risk of collapse, the greatest secret of King Nastasen awaited. Would courage be enough to conquer the darkness and the threat of collapse? Or would Nastasen be the only one to be permanently interred here? This final challenge was not merely an archaeological mission. It was a battle for survival between modern humans and the fury of ancient nature. Despite working in an almost unbearable environment, where visibility was zero and every breath carried the risk of collapse, the expedition team pressed on. Their persistence began to pay off with precious clues. Every bucket of mud brought up contained fragments of history. They found evidence of a gilded falcon statue, an incredibly important, almost unique discovery. These statues often represented a protective deity. Additionally, darkened bone fragments and pieces of leather began to appear. Leather. This was a crucial hint. According to the royal Kushite burial rites of the time, the king was often placed upon, or wrapped in, a precious leather mat. These fragments of leather and bone were the strongest indicators that the king was here, or is still here. More important than any artifact, Pearce Paul began to decipher the underwater architecture. By feeling and mentally mapping the space in the dark, he identified the center of the burial chamber. There he discovered something almost impossible, a massive stone slab. This slab was so large that even stretching out his arms and legs, he could only just touch its four corners. What astonished him more than its size was its surface. It was incredibly flat, almost cut, resting right in the middle of the room like a ceremonial table. Analyzing the position of the artifacts, the team formed a bold hypothesis. This rock must have fallen after Nastasen was buried, because they found a Shabti statue wedged under its corner. If the powerful king was here, logic dictated he must lie beneath this enormous slab. Kristin called the rock fall event the tomb tsunami. The fallen stones might have broken some artifacts, but at the same time, they created an unparalleled layer of protection. The slab, sitting in the center of the chamber, right where the king should be, had become an unbreakable shield, protecting Nastasen's body from every danger for 2 millennia. The massive slab was a promise, but also a challenge. It had protected Nastasen, but now it blocked the path to the truth. The archaeologists had found everything: gold leaf, bone, leather. But they needed a personal artifact, an undeniable mark of the king, to confirm their success. Under the pressure of time, where every minute underwater was a gamble with death, Pearce Paul focused all his senses on the edge of the slab. He had to work like an investigator groping through an ancient crime scene, relying completely on touch. Zero visibility meant he was digging in absolute darkness, using only his bare hands to push the dense mud from under the slab's edge. In the stillest moment, when the sound of his breathing apparatus was the only thing left, his finger touched a small, hard object. Not rock, not bone. It had a regular, rounded shape. Sound. The music cuts out suddenly, leaving only the diver's breathing, creating maximum tension. Close up on the small object in the dark. He carefully worked the object loose from the mud. Pearce Paul. Voice over radio, slightly shaky but filled with irrepressible excitement. I found it. It's right here. He quickly pulled himself out of the dark chamber, rushing to the surface. Kristin waited, her eyes tense. Pearce Paul opened his muddy hand, and there was the victory. A small metallic object, cleaned with a little water. It was a seal ring, not discarded gold flakes, not a generic Shabti. This was the most personal artifact, the highest symbol of power and responsibility. This seal ring could only belong to one person, King Nastasen. It was the final piece of the puzzle, undeniable confirmation that Nastasen still lies peacefully right beneath the slab they had just discovered. Background. Music softens, transitioning to an emotional, reflective tone. Beautiful images of the Sudan pyramids. The massive stone slab had fulfilled its duty. It was not an obstacle, but a faithful guardian. This discovery does not just fill a void in the overlooked history of Kush. It also proves that, even in the deepest darkness, the truth will be found, protected by the very forces of time and change. King Nastasen, after 2,000 years of oblivion, is finally ready to tell his story. Outro. The discovery of King Nastasen's seal ring is one of the greatest archaeological moments of this century. It not only confirms the existence of an intact royal tomb, but also stands as a testament to the resilience of a forgotten civilization. That ring has confirmed. King Nastasen is still waiting beneath the massive stone slab. The story has only just begun. Can the expedition team find a way to lift that 2,000-year-old shield without collapsing the entire tomb? What secrets lie in wait beneath? Leave a comment right now and share your speculation. What is resting beneath that colossal stone slab? A treasure or history itself? Don't miss the next chapter. Hit subscribe to our channel and join us as we continue to explore and unveil the final mystery of this great Nubian king.